To my left is Rob Zaremski. He is the Federal Government Business Development Manager at Bosch. To the left of him, our first panelist, Colby Meshi. I should have mentioned Rob Zaremski's co-moderator with me, sorry. So Colby Meshi, Director of Enterprise Physical Security Division, Security Management Directorate for Pentagon Force Protection Agency. To the left of Colby, Aldrich Kamat, Branch Chief for Pentagon Force Protection Agency's Electronic Security Systems. And to the left of Aldrich, Charlie Goodamy, Statewide Interoperability Coordinator for District of Columbia's Homeland Security and Emergency Management Agency. Thank you guys for joining us today. Okay, to kick things off, our first question to you guys, Charlie, this is going to be directed to you, and guys from PFBA, feel free to add in too once he's wrapped up. So when you're looking for new technologies to improve your current protocols, how do you manage exposure to these new technologies and determine the difference between what is established and mature and what is conceptual?
Yeah, Brad, oftentimes when we're looking at technology, it usually follows a tragedy or some sort of breach, and we have to take that into consideration. Another source of information for us is our after-action reports or risk assessments and needs. Also, technology coming to small venues like this, looking what the vendors have out there. Even the previous speaker, he talked about communications. And it's that interaction between the first responders and the private sector, I think, that help advance the technology. I think the previous speaker, his company is probably going about selling that communications piece a little bit wrong. They're focusing on the security industry, but I think we all know certainly safety and security is one lifeline, but communications is another lifeline. And some of his products that he was talking about represents 2/4 of the emergency communications ecosystem. And there's a market for that if they're willing to explore that in communications. So I think it's taking the expertise on some of the people that come visit your booths and taking that into consideration. Other ways, sometimes when you work for the public sector, your information is freely available. So my doorbell rings and my phone rings, and all of a sudden I hear, "Hey, it's so and so, and I've got the product for you," type of thing. So that cold calling is always happening, continuously happening, especially after an incident happens or a high-profile event they want to get into. But I think it's the references from our partners and in the district, whether it's another district agency, our federal partners, our national capital region stakeholders. They may be trying a technology and they'll call up, "Hey, you guys might want to look at this." That's also a great source for us. And then very fortunate to be able to work with a lot of different labs, whether it's Department of Homeland Security Science and Technology, the Transportation Security Lab, NIST's Public Safety Communications Research. There's a lot of different labs out there that are conducting research and want to try to transition it to the first responders. So that's a great source for us, boots on the ground.
And I would just like to say, we've often talked about these formal, industry groups or these groups composed of both end users, integrators, customers, and our alarm monitors down our operations center. And really, whether that's formal or informal, these small groups that we can get together in, thanks to Chesapeake for putting this one together, or just, getting out, away from the office and really talking to peers to kind of benchmark where your organization is at with technology. I think that's helped PFPA really keep pace with a lot of both industry partners and government partners. So that's...
Yeah, absolutely. And events like this, right, where you get to talk with integrators and vendors alike. I think we met with some folks from the Department of Transportation as well as the USCP, where we could just do that information sharing. And, instead of doing like a project, do a project, right, where we have to do a bake off a whole bunch of solutions to find out what's the best in the breed, so to speak. We could talk to our fellow agencies and say, hey, this doesn't work really well for these use cases. So that's something that you may want to adopt in your operations.
Very good. All right, second question, we're going to start with Charlie again. how do you establish stakeholder governance of new technology in order to determine who gets a seat at the table when you're vetting, testing, implementing, training, and commissioning new technologies?
Well, I think it first starts off with what stage is the technology at? Are you having a conversation? Is it on the back of a napkin? Is it a PowerPoint slide? Do they have a prototype? Are they in production? Or are they trying to transition from use A and they see you as use B and they get you in that conversation? So the governance piece is always important to get the right people at the table. You need the decision makers, but also you need that end user input, because if you're going to have any trials, it can't only be based on that middle manager that make that procurement. You need the feedback from the boots on the ground, the people that are ultimately going to use on it. So the governance piece and stakeholder engagement is critical to making any decision.
And I would just say, probably early in my career, it's easy to go to these big conferences to get caught up in, it seems like every 2 years there's a new buzzword associated with the security industry. And it's really easy to get wrapped up in that and think that is what the end user needs. And I think if you go and spend time, for example, PIFPA has a large alarm monitoring cadre. Go and sit with those folks and understand kind of the challenge that they face every day. We've been able to make a lot of progress in alarm reduction and getting actionable alerts to these guys and girls down there that, at one point we're getting millions of alarms per month, and it's completely unusable, to a point now where it's much more manageable. The things that are coming into their feed, is stuff that is important to them to do their job. And, I think that constant feedback loop and even engaging those end users in conferences, in selection of technology, has been really beneficial for PFPA.
Yeah, absolutely. So the end user, I think the term force multiplier comes to mind, right? So you really don't get that feedback unless you bring in the end user first and foremost. As technologists, we all look at some type of solution and we think that, this is the best thing since sliced bread. But in operations, when you actually get out into the field and into production, we find that it is, in fact, the opposite. So we can get them, gather their requirements from them specifically, maybe, measure that against a baseline of what they have now. That'll put us in a better position to identify a solution to help them do their jobs out in the field.
Also, just to add one more point, I see a lot of my guys in this room, actually. It's super important to sell up through the chain of command as well. I've got bosses that have their own ideas about technology, and I think keeping them informed on what the industry is doing, why it's important that your agency or organization go that direction, kind of alleviates some of the sticker shock or the shock when you're asking for these things in your planning process.
If I could also add, well, first of all, I feel like I'm in a PIFPA sandwich. I got you guys on this side and the whole front row here from your organization. But I think, again, when we talk about the end users, oftentimes, and I deal with a cynical bunch, first responders, it doesn't get any more cynical. They'll come to me about their radio or their cell phone. They'll be like, my phone sucks. Okay, tell me a little bit more, because I'm having a hard time trying to fix suck. What does that actually mean, right? And then, I couldn't, what were you doing? Give me the date, the time, the location. Were you trying to voice call? Were you texting? Were you trying to stream video? Were you trying to upload, download? This is the information that I need. And the more you interact with the end users, that valuable information you're going to get, they'll become a willing partner and they'll feel part of the process. So if you introduced a new technology and they were part of the education process, decision-making process, it's more likely to be accepted. So that's just something from my personal experience.
Okay, next question going to be to Colby and Aldrich to start off, and Charlie to add in. So high priority redundant systems versus minimum requirements. What are you guys doing to determine resiliency requirements in your applications?
So we would hold, different exercises throughout the year. We do an integrated services test in conjunction with our building operator team. So we identify how our systems operate, right? Once we do lose communication or electrical support, right? Additionally, we look to the integrator to kind of identify the latest solution in terms of redundancy, right? Whether that be, clustering or something that's cloud-based. We really kind of rely on our integrators and to you guys to provide us those brand new solutions out there. I've always been told, I think the gentleman before us talked about, you don't want to be in the best guitar player in the room. Similarly, and more literally, you don't want to be the smartest person in the room, especially as federal employees. It's probably pretty easy to do, but that's why we surround ourselves with contractors and vendors and manufacturers like yourself.
Cool. In terms of obviously high priority is going to be priority. Oftentimes limited budgets, you don't get the opportunity to get the nice to has. You got to focus on what the priority is and be able to introduce that. And I think a lot of times I've dealt with a lot of different salespeople. They think that they're going to come in and try to close you and you're going to be part of that quarter for them. Well, it doesn't work like that. Even if I desperately wanted it and you're talking to me now, I'm in the current budget cycle, so that's over. Probably the next budget cycle is already set, and we're looking at the following one to get in there. So even if I really want it, I'm looking at a minimum 2 years down the road that I can get it if it's a big purchase. So from a high priority standpoint, what was the second half of the question?
Just how you determine, I guess, the resiliency requirement. How much redundancy needs to be in the system?
Yeah, I think so. Again, we're continuously students of events. One watershed moment was for us was Christmas Day 2020, the Nashville bombing. And when we saw whether that was the intent or not, the AT&T switching station got taken out, impacting 7 states in the southeast quarter of the United States, and shutting down 170 public safety answering points and 911 centers, temporarily shut down the airport. When everybody claims they have redundancy and failover, you need to make sure that is true and accurate, because you don't want to be on that side of it. The one day when boom goes off and you find out that you thought you had all of these redundant pathways, but they come to this one choke point, and that choke point was taken out. So everything we look at it, we borrowed the term from the military, from a PACE perspective, and we want to make sure that it has a primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency communications pathway for functionality.
I would just echo that. Understanding your dependencies. For us in particular, we have a very challenging network environment, one that's managed by others, and oftentimes they treat us like we are not the customer. So I think understanding what resiliency means to include all of your dependencies. So it doesn't matter if you have the strongest application in the world and it's resilient, and we got multi-servers, and Ed can tell you all about that as our C2 lead over there. It's still dependent on a network, and that application is only as strong as the network is. So I think fostering a good relationship with those folks, over communicating what your goals are, not just this year, but 5 years from now, is a way to set yourself up for success. We've gone from 700 cameras in the past 10 years to over 3,500 cameras. So that brings a unique set of challenges across all of our enterprise sites. So I think just not losing sight of the big picture in terms of network health and application health.
Very good.
I just want to confirm, you have guys on that side of the room too?
I do, yeah. Look, all these characters over here. Even Steve's part of the team, technically. So,
who's not Piffer? Raise your hand.
Well, who's at the Pentagon right now?
Yeah. No, that's actually a better question.
Let's start with Charlie on this one as well. So what focus points need to be maintained while you review technology options in order to make a decision? Is it shiny and new or practical and useful?
Yeah, I think I said it earlier, right? Priorities have to be taken into consideration, and versus the nice-to-haves. And then where is the technology in the development? I think I also stated earlier. Sometimes we get, working with those labs, we'll get that prototype and everybody gets excited for it, only to find out that they're waiting for the next funding stream to develop that technology further. So that all comes down to it a lot. But, you know, we're very fortunate here in the DC National Capital Region that we're resource rich. So if we may not be able to get a technology immediately, maybe one of our regional partners has it, and we do a lot of procuring through the COG, which is the Council of Governments. We buy things from a regional perspective through grants. So if one agency is not utilizing it, another one can be utilize it for a specific event or a specific incident. So we have that kind of flexibility. But it goes back to, we're looking at high priority over the nice-to-haves, and we don't mind helping with the development, but if we have a need, we got to go with what's ready at this point in time.
If I could add to that question, is there a specific like technical readiness level or TRL that you need to be at before you'll start vetting or evaluating?
No, we're constantly in evaluation mode. In 12 days, I have the Marine Corps Marathon, and part of our security plan is I'll be vetting for different technologies for first responding enhancements.
Very good.
So it kind of leads into this next question. And Charlie, this is for you, and then Colby, I'll just add in, please. And I know Aldrich, you mentioned force multiplier, but using technology integration as a force multiplier, can you guys speak to how can you use cross-platform operations to make event response more efficient?
Yeah, I think the previous speaker was kind of touching on that, right? Multi-use of an existing technology is kind of a pathway we want to go down to. Even for the first responder, they're coming up with all of these new gadgets that pretty soon we're going to require a waistband of 46, to put all of this stuff on there. So how do we get it all maybe into one device? But then we have to watch out, because then that becomes anti-pace. Do you have all your eggs in one basket if you lose that? So it's all of this balance on how do we make the first responder, I guess in your case the warfighter, more efficient without bogging them down, right? That they could get out of their own way. They don't have to have this 46-inch waist to carry all of this equipment that we're trying to give them. And those are for the personal borne devices. There's the other stuff that you mount or mobile devices, but the same type of mentality is what we look at for the usefulness of it. Because there may be times you may not be able to get into the venue to put out tactical equipment because it's unsafe to do so.
Well, actually, to that, Charlie, we were talking before, integrating capabilities like cameras and voice or sound. We recently, I'll do a plug here, recently introduced gunshot detection. So something like that, combining those capabilities, and an example would be the Navy Yard shootings. If that was present or available at the time, how might that have changed the response?
Yeah, I think, and for those of you who don't know, last month was the 10-year anniversary of the Navy Yard shooting, where 12 people, just because they chose to go to work, they never came home that day. Gunshots were real. Video with integrated gunshot detection and PA capability. Another thing that haunted us that day was as people were evacuating Building 197 at the Navy Yard, someone pulled the fire alarm to get their colleagues out. So that hampered communications going in for the first responders, and also unified command, because anytime anyone keyed the mic, all you heard was the blaring of the siren at that point in time. So in essence, that person couldn't hear you and we couldn't hear them. So if we had a single technology providing us the situational awareness, maybe with the gunshot detection and the PA system that, hey, we can't hear you, but don't go into that room. We know that guy's in that room in there, because it was technology that got a Metropolitan Police officer shot. There was a active shooter team going up one of the stairwells, and Aaron Alexis at one point, he heard the transmission coming from his radio because he didn't have an earpiece. He didn't have to find that team. He waited at the threshold of the door. When that team came in, point blank, he shot that officer twice in the legs. That officer had to be taken down. So that's an instance where a technology for communications was used against you, and a simple thing like an earpiece could have avoided that scenario.
I think for PFPA, we've been working on gunshot detection for a long time, actually with Bosch as a partner. And, they've been helping us develop a low-cost solution, and that's been key because of our 10 million square feet of building space. But really, how do we get eyes on a situation quicker? So we have 3,500 cameras across all of our facilities. People are not looking at those cameras every day. So we've worked with Bosch to test and we've actually shot inside our building with live ammo to determine an audible threshold and sound anomaly that will pull up a camera based on some things that Bosch has done in BVMS that will pull up a camera based on a sound anomaly. And shockingly, those loud noises across the building are very low. So we think we're going to be able to be successful in key areas across the Pentagon to be able to detect loud noises essentially and get eyes on that. And I think that's going to allow the end user, the alarm monitor, to say something is clearly wrong here. People are running. There's something going on camera, or somebody dropped a pallet on the floor and it's not anything that we need to worry about. So,
very good. This next question will direct at Colby and Aldrich. What are your biggest challenges in managing system maintenance and upkeep across large multi-site systems?
Sure, I'll lead off, I guess. I think, we have a very challenging network environment and touched on that. So I think one of the things that's been important for our subsystems is creating what we'll call a system heartbeat. And that's really just, a tool to know that a sensor is operational and is doing what it should be doing. And, whether that is on a PAC system where you push a button and an alarm comes in because it's been so quiet during the night shift that we're not sure that it's still working. That's something that we've had to do in the past because of how low we've gotten alarms across the enterprise. So I think, we've pushed, and I've pushed our guys, probably, some of them curse me out some weeks on really operational checks of camera systems. But this is all stuff that is relatively inexpensive. I mean, to check cameras every week, to know what's operational throughout the week, I think it's extremely important. We've had problems with, speaking of Commend, they are not who we use, but we've had problems with call boxes in our parking lot, and nobody knew if they were up or down. So creating, I think, system mechanisms to know for sure when things are operational has been very key for us.
Absolutely. So, right now, to check our camera health, we literally look at each camera. And you can imagine that burden for 3,500 cameras throughout the enterprise. So, enabling those type of mechanisms where we have an easy snapshot of our system health in terms of like network bandwidth, network burden, right? Whether or not that each camera is not only online and connected, but actually recording and has no obstruction, things like that, to help better the maintainer level, do their jobs.
And I think in the real world, that also applies what these gentlemen just said. Oftentimes, you'll have a breach back door, go check the camera, and that camera's out. Or you go to investigate a crime in the neighborhood, and you see a Ring camera, and you go there, it goes, oh, my camera hasn't been working for months type of thing. So it's always the back end that you find out that the stuff is not working. I like to see us moving forward that we get more alerts on the front end so we avoid all of that stuff, because forensically, we lose out on all of that capability when the technology is not there to assist us.
Okay, next is going to be for Colby and Aldrich, and Charlie, if you want to add in. And Colby, you kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, as far as new technologies being introduced all the time, but there's things that I guess put a hindrance on how fast you can deploy that stuff, like IT constraints, regulations with that, authorities to operate, accreditation processes. Can you kind of just explain like what that process looks like, and it's not always as simple as, hey, you got the new thing out, let's just implement.
Sure. Yeah, I think for us, we're 12 to 14 months before you could put something on our network. So right off the rip, if you find something you love, it's 12 months. I mean, and that's best case scenario. That's pre-contracting everything. So, I think it requires forecasting. I think, you've got to have, I think, multiple avenues towards success. I think you've got to deliver small wins over time. You can speak more to some of the challenges specifically with what we've been doing on PACs and things like that. But
sure thing. Yeah. So oftentimes whenever we get a solution, right, one of the first things we ask is, where else in the federal space are you working, right? Because it's just easier to ride the coattails of that agency and say, hey, this agency has it, they're utilizing it, it's successful, so we can also do it as well, and then we can spin up an ATO for that specific solution. Just like Colby alluded to, if it's something brand new, it's never touched any type of certification process whatsoever in the federal government. I mean, 12 to 14 months is pretty fast, unfortunately. But just, I think, knowing what certifications you need to meet, and getting into that door and getting an ATO as quickly as possible would be beneficial, right? Not only to us because we get a better solution for our use cases, but of course you guys grow your business. So
I think working with partners that understand that process is super important as well. We're pretty blessed to have good integrators and good partners across all of our technology that understand that. We've also made some, I guess, quicker progress on products that are cloud ready that have a FedRAMP certification. So we're doing that for body cams. I think we will be one of the first, if not the first, to do body cams across the federal government on our network. So I would say keep an eye out for vendors that do support that.
Yeah, locally, I'd just add too, anytime we introduce anything, the first conversation is with our in-house IT people, but that conversation, because they know what the answer from Big IT, which is the Office of the Chief Technology Office for the district, they start off with the little no's because they know they could give away to the big no's that are coming. And a lot of it is, unfortunately, everything is digitally based, IP based today. So it's hard when you're trying to do some stuff because you may not be able to have the capability to do it in-house. And then when you try to share it with other partners, even more challenging, especially so many of our partners are federal in the District of Columbia, and they have a whole other set of rules and regulations. So the IT world can be problematic. I mean, from a pace perspective, too, I'm the guy that when they take the fax machine out, I'm hanging on to the guy's ankles because I don't want to see that thing go. Having everything IP-based, we need some of that old technology and the analog to stay behind because I've been throughout my career, scenarios have kicked me down to caveman days, and we need to know how to respond in those situations. And the caveman didn't have any zeros and ones.
Yeah, I would also add, I mean, not to bash our IT, brethren, brothers and sisters.
Is there any of those guys in the room?
And another thing, I don't know what it is between physical and logical. There's always been a kind of bumping of heads. And, we've always had this kind of incestuous relationship because we utilize our networks, right? But whatever that challenge is to get over that, we're going to be working closer and closer. As you had the discussion this morning, is particularly cyber-based, right? The gentleman talked about zero trust earlier. So whatever that, I guess, bifurcation between those two worlds needs to start merging. And, we try to do that as best as we can, definitely.
There you go. So this next question, this was touched on for sure earlier. I'm going to go ahead and ask it to see if you guys want to go any deeper. If not, we can move on to the next one. In making a decision in information sharing, is there a benefit to consulting those that are already testing technology, even if their implementation is different? I
would say absolutely. We've done a couple of very, very large projects. The one that comes to my mind is our implementation of physical security information management system. And that collated all of our subsystems into kind of a single pane of glass for us. It also allowed us to do some rules engineering stuff in the background to decrease our alerts that the actual SOC sees. We did tons of homework on that. both with industry and government partners. We took end users out to those sites to better understand what we were getting into. We showed them multiple different applications that we were considering at the time. And ultimately, we allowed the end user to kind of make the decision on what they felt would be best moving forward, because they're the ones that are going to end up using it every day. And I think finding partners that are as invested in your success as you are, and that sounds pretty cliche, but we've been really lucky to find good partners in PFPA, Bosch being one of them, that has really listened to what's important to us. And we talk about some of these things like camera health and gunshot detection. And they have been as invested as we are. And it's nice to have a partnership that kind of, helps move both of you in that direction. Because I think ultimately it is beneficial for both industry and the end user to kind of move in the same direction together. So,
yeah, definitely info sharing. So I think your best salesperson is your other customer who just raves about your solution. I would say please don't be shy of introducing us to your fellow customers who kind of operate similarly, just because they kind of understand the different challenges that we're going through from our perspective of just being a good steward of the federal taxpayer. I want to bring a shout out to Jason Wills over there of the video program. So PIPA has been working on a body camera solution for...
What row was he in? I didn't see him.
There he is, right there.
Go, Chase.
That guy's a pillar to the PIPA institution. But we've been working on a body camera program for, that was 2017. And, our local, counterparts, they've had it for, 20 years, it seems like, or something like that. That's how, fast we move. But now that the executive order came out last year, word has kind of spread that PFPA has this pilot. So I want to say within the past 2 months, we've demoed to countless agencies across the department. So just that little bit of, word of mouth type of advertisement can go a long way. So I guess it's more for the agencies to kind of spread the message, so to speak, of what they employed. But you guys as integrators and as manufacturers can help spread that message. Like, if you guys need to fulfill this certain use case, well, we've got a customer over here who is facing that exact same challenge.
I think I just want to add that, the protection of the district, the protection of the National Capital Region is based on mutual aid. Mutual aid is based on relationships, so you want to capitalize on those relationships when somebody else is testing the technology to reach out, hey, how's it working? Because they're going to give you the true pitfalls and success stories of that technology in their environment, which is critical to you. It's going to almost parallel your environment. The laws may be different, or maybe the certain rules will be different, but you'll get a better understanding coming from an end user in the partnering agency than you may from the vendor. So it's very important to go down that route.
Sure.
And one thing I would just add is PFPA in general and Aldrich's team, we're an open book. So, it's kind of nice that we have a small venue here. If there's anybody that wants to see some of the stuff we're doing in person or talk about it more, feel free to approach either of us or any of these 50 people in the room. We definitely are into sharing what we're doing, and we definitely we benchmark against peers. Some of the bigger ones, Google, Amazon, and we also like to do that across federal government as well.
If I could add to that, it is important to manufacturers to have your feedback, because oftentimes our baby may not be as pretty as we think it is. So we appreciate that feedback.
Sometimes it's ugly.
All right, this next question directed to Colby and Aldrich, but really Charlie, all three of you. I know it came up in our initial conversation when we were talking about what we're going to discuss, but so kind of a off topic, but staffing challenges. How does that impact deployment timelines? And as a result, introduction to delaying introduction to new technologies.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with the federal hiring process. I'm sure you guys on this side of the room are familiar with. But to put things in perspective, the ESS branch for PFPA has not been fully staffed like it is now for, I'd say, within the going back about 5 years. That's how long it takes to get us. So utilizing, like contractors like Arcitas, using the expertise like the integrators and manufacturers and vendors backing them up is critical to helping kind of, fill those gaps, right? Just because the federal employee oversight, they're just not going to be able to stretch themselves to, be at every single location. So, venues like this, as well as like GSX, ISD West, they're so critical in terms of communicating those latest solutions and making those connections with other customers.
I would just say buy on potential. We've been successful on, maybe a person doesn't have everything you need in terms of certification, but certainly that stuff becomes a lot easier when you're in a government organization. We can get folks out, we can certify, we can send people places like this. I think you got to grow your people, grow a pipeline of folks that are familiar with the environment.
I think staffing shortages is a reality. We look at our Office of Unified Communications, the district's 911 center. Not enough people to answer the calls, not enough dispatches. Then they're mandatory overtime to cover the shifts, and then that degrades their performance because they're tired. They have their personal life interfering it. As we look at our police department, we had a well-documented retirement bubble coming. It was compounded by the fact of defunding the police. Today, we are 800 officers down in the District of Columbia. So when you're trying to introduce new technologies, they could barely cover the posts and the beats that they're covering, and it's not something that they're really highly interested in. And the other side of it is that we talked about the procurement cycle. They are now getting the technology in their hands that we decided 2 years ago because of the procurement. So you want to try to introduce something at a test. Dude, you just gave me this thing. Now you want to give me this other thing in here. Meanwhile, my run sheet is 20 calls. So staffing shortages is a reality we have to deal with today.
All right. Well, this is our last question for you guys. In the effort to advance artificial intelligence to detect, deter, and improve situational awareness, what are the biggest challenges to getting stakeholders to embrace the changes associated and buy into utilization of these capabilities as part of their mission?
I think for us, it's really education to the end user. Making them or having them understand what this is going to do to the security environment is going to be very important for us. It's a conversation that we've just started, essentially, with our organization. We are, I would say, generally a pretty forward technology-leaning agency, but I think it's going to be a massive challenge, not only to demonstrate what AI can do for them, but to just kind of have everybody wrap their head around the complexity associated with it.
Yeah, I mean, not even specific to AI, it's just anything new in general, right? We've got operators and end users that have been doing the same thing for decades. And any mention of any type of, virtualization or moving to a web portal puts up such a resistance. So this is kind of comes full circle in bringing that end user back to the beginning of the conversation to really show them and to let them understand that it's for their benefit and their day-to-day operations that things will improve with this capability.
I think for the challenge we're seeing with the workforce today is twofold. Number one is to have confidence in that machine is making the right decision, because ultimately you're going to make a decision based on that machine's decision, and it's your ass on the line. And the other thing is, you always get concerned is job security. They don't want this machine to come in. If it starts doing good, I might be out. So that's a reality that some people are concerned about.
I think, and just add to that question, do you think with the younger generation and the exposure that they've had to this type of technology, are you going to see that phase change in large part like we're seeing in something as simple as McDonald's, where you can go in and order your food on the screen. You don't see anyone until they hand you a bag. Yeah. You paid for it. You've done all that. Do you think that over time, again, with what we're seeing, I know my kids have fully embraced this type of capability.
I think there is a natural progression. I mean, we've been talking about, like, forget AI and all that, but just a more immersive experience, in alarm monitoring. Really, like, the visualization tools for the end user, for the people in our ops centers. And these guys grew up on, PlayStation 5. They grew up on these different things. And I think we've just recently seen that through our integrator, we've went to a hybrid alarm monitoring approach with contractors and government folks. And I think typically the contractors are a younger bunch. And I think you do see more, adoption of technology easier. But I still think you've got to over-communicate the overall intent. And I think you still got to get their feedback, because it doesn't matter. We've had a 3D model in our PSIM, and it has not been good. And it's something that they're working on. But it doesn't matter if it's 3D and looks cool in a lab setting. It's got to be useful, usable, and I think when it is that, folks will take to it quicker.
Okay, well, that wraps up our questioning. I'm open it up to anybody in the audience that has any questions for these gentlemen.
Being exposed to many agencies, border security, city, and all that, my biggest concern right now is in the technology, which is considered operating technologies, which is the world we live in. A lot of those technologies basically are not up to speed in being challenged by cybersecurity. So I see that NIST 882 R3, I don't know if you're aware of that, which basically is finally it's coming up from your agency, DoD. Actually, Federal Henry is the person who's leading that. Okay, I'm glad to see that finally, because we experienced in the past with many civilian agencies, DoD agencies, where our command centers with hundreds of cameras, thousands of cameras, being wiped out by IT folks. So IT folks also need to start understanding operating technologies, because to me, in my rationality, IT, you lose IT, but you lose money. Like you lose OT, you lose lives. Yeah. And what is basically your thoughts about advancing more new technologies? Quantum computing is coming now. So are we ready for that? We prepped up with all the border issues that we have. They're capturing all that stuff in the south and the northern border. I've done border security as well. So I being in your shoes, it's a big, to me, I really take my hat off for you guys, because you have a lot of challenges. But I had to tell you some things about those upcoming challenges that we have, because I will also urge you to go to the Black Hat conference up there in Las Vegas. You'll learn a lot about that stuff, what they do. Thankfully, they don't understand much about yet our technologies. Thank you.
Thanks for the recommendation. Yeah, I couldn't agree more in terms of that IT partnership. I can still remember Steve 7 years ago saying, don't give up your private network. And I don't ever say Steve's right, but we've certainly pondered what it would be to take back that network now, and I think that would be a tough road for us to win. But involving our IT counterparts is something we go through it daily. Our team has been troubleshooting stuff for the past 3 months with them, it seems like, and I don't know how we get there in terms of like a fully recognized solution, but I know it probably starts with just more communication, more involvement with them.
I think you're in the right room, with those, with those sentiments. From a physical security perspective, it just seems like, our IT counterparts are just worried about the network, which understandably so, right? They're looking to check the boxes, make sure that we're hardened, employ these latest cybersecurity related mechanisms. While we, on the other hand, are worried about making sure that our first responders and warfighter and our contract security officers have the available resources to them to them to make to perform their mission. So yeah, it's definitely a conundrum that's been out there for a long time. Not really sure what the solution is, other than just information sharing, right? Trying to get the other side to see and understand where you're coming from, and conversely, try to understand where they're coming from as well. I think
to your point, sir, I'd like to add, we have in-depth conversations with the big three carriers, and the last thing I want to see is copper wire being pulled, right, for our analog capability. We've had ring-down phone capabilities that when you pick up the phone, it could hit 6 simultaneous command centers. That is all going away now. They're not going to maintain that. It's costly for them. They want everything to be fiber optics, where it's IP-based. And the second part of that is because of IP-based, now they're telling me we could get better service because they could do stuff remotely and you could do all of that. But with that convenience comes additional threat vectors that you're referring to, and that is the trade-off that we have to face, and we didn't sign up for that. I mean, again, if you have a robust PACE plan, copper wiring, analog devices should be part of that PACE plan. If you have all of your eggs in the IP basket, we're headed for disaster.
So great panel. Enjoyed listening to you guys. Excellent folks and entertaining too. My question is about gunshot detection. So Colby had mentioned earlier about how the industry has some hot buttons every couple of years. And, gunshot detection's been around for years. Multiple companies coming in and out of the business.
Yes.
People that I know that are, hey, I'm working for ShotSpotter now, and that was 2 years ago.
Yep.
He's working for somebody else now. It's been a hot button, come and gone. So, asking you guys individually, why do you feel that gunshot detection has failed as a widely implemented technology?
I would say from our perspective, it's costly. I think we've been trying to attack this kind of as a inexpensive solution. So how can we do that inexpensively? We have a ton of real estate. We were able to repurpose infrastructure from over 800 optical sensors inside the building. So that's allowed us to just kind of install an inline microphone with the anomaly detection that we spoke about. You're talking about for the cost of a $200-$300 microphone, you're getting a kind of bolt-on capability that I think when we shot in the building, we shot with every one of the big gunshot detection systems, and this solution performed very comparable to those, and that's ones with muzzle flash detection and much more advanced technology in the actual sensor than a microphone. So I think for us, it has been there's a great amount of trade-off to do this at a low cost across the entire enterprise, where we have most of our cameras. Get eyes on a situation and put the situation to bed. If we were building new building and we had kind of an upfront unlimited, security budget, I think it probably would warrant gunshot detection. But to do that across an existing facility, I think would be problematic for us, given budget constraints and given everything else that is kind of emergent in the world in terms of security. Does that answer it?
Yeah, it does. I mean, it really assigns a priority to the technology.
Yeah.
So maybe the answer could potentially be it's just not as useful because, Charlie had talked about reactionary spending. What prompts us to spend money, and a lot of times it's a tragic event and whatnot. So.
And maybe it's not full build outs of that technology. Maybe it's just getting key intersections across facilities that, we can determine, we see 7,000 people an hour at the MEF when it's its busiest. So, that's obviously a pretty busy entrance, and odds are something's going to happen. And it has happened in the past historically there. So, maybe the answer is kind of just getting portions of it in key avenues.
Yeah, I would also say, I mean, I think Boss hit it right on the head. We didn't expect that the gunshot solution, or there's this, I guess, misnomer, if you will, that the gunshot detection systems would be, something simple to put up, right? Run a couple of, 2-pair, but it's really just, some of these things are, IP based. We need another power source that we haven't accounted for. And you can imagine trying to, put these type of sensors throughout some place like the Pentagon. That's just a whole new infrastructure altogether. So, I mean, it's not just, buying a, couple $100 device. Now we're looking at, tens of thousands of dollars of infrastructure just for that one device. I would also say that, user confidence in the solution itself. And you can say that with anything, right, in terms of like perimeter detection or anything like that. But, if the operator are constantly seeing these alarms and they just grow numb to these alarms, in my mind, a gunshot detection, your blue lights, you're responding, you're going full force. But if you have to tailor that response to where, well, it might just be this, right? So, you don't have to respond that way. I think it kind of detracts from the purpose of the solution.
We have tested all that stuff, though. ShotSpotter, both internal, external. If you ever want to see any of our data, just let us know.
I very much appreciate you guys all taking time out to come over here and speak with us. Thank you very much. It's very impactful.
I appreciate you having us.
Bosch, invented for life.